Hello, beautiful souls. How are you? I am coming to you today with another episode of our Founding Fathers Discovery Series. Today is episode 6, and this is for Abraham Lincoln. If you thought you knew anything about Abraham Lincoln, you were probably wrong. This was one of those that almost immediately I started getting downloads when I started reading through some of the history that we were taught. And I did have my doubts, like when certain movie came out about him. I was like, wow, that's a stretch. I know when it first came out, I mean, it was long before I was cleared and had access to speaking to souls on the other side of the veil. But nonetheless, here we are. He is considered one of the most significant presidents of the United States history. And I definitely feel like his story needs to be told. Abraham Lincoln, born 1809, died 1865. That has an asterisk for assassination. He was the 16th United States president, born 1861. I'm sorry, born 1809, died 1865. President from 1861 to 1865. He was considered to be an American lawyer, politician, and statesman who served as the 16th president of the United States. Lincoln led the United States through the American Civil War, defending the nation as a constitutional union, defeating the insurgent Confederacy, playing a major role in the abolition of slavery, expanding the power of the federal government, and modernization of the U.S. economy. Lincoln was born into poverty in a log cabin in Kentucky and was raised on the frontier, mainly in Indiana. He was self-educated and became a lawyer, an Illinois state legislator, and a U.S. representative for the state of Illinois. In 1849, he returned to his successful law practice in Springfield, Illinois. In 1854, he was angered by the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which opened the territories back up to slavery, causing him to re-enter politics. He soon became a leader of the new Republican Party. Lincoln ran for president in 1860, sweeping the North to gain victory. Pro-slavery elements of the South viewed his election as a threat to slavery, and Southern states began seceding from the nation. During this time, the newly formed Confederate States of America began seizing federal military bases in the South. A little over a month after Lincoln assumed the presidency, Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Following the bombardment, Lincoln mobilized forces to suppress the rebellion and restore the Union. So, right away, conflict. Lincoln was a moderate Republican. He had to navigate contentious array of factions with friends and opponents from both the Democratic and Republican parties. His allies, the war Democrats, that's what they called themselves, and the radical Republicans, demanded harsh treatment of the Southern Confederates. He managed the factions by exploiting their mutual enmity and carefully distributing political patronage by appealing to the American people. Anti-war Democrats, also called Copperheads, despised Lincoln. Some irreconcilable Confederate elements went so far as to plot his assassination. His Gettysburg Address came to be seen as one of the greatest and most influential statements of the American national purpose. Lincoln closely supervised the strategy and tactics in the war effort, including a selection of generals, and implemented a naval blockade in the South's trade. In 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that the slaves in states of the rebellion to be free. It also directed that the Army and the Navy had to recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons. To receive them into the armed services of the United States, Lincoln pressured both border states to outlaw slavery, and he also promoted the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which abolished slavery except as punishment for a crime. I'm going to pause right here. If you have not seen the film, I believe it's on Netflix, but it's other places as well, called 13th. It is a documentary about the 13th Amendment. How it came about was good intentioned, and then quite quickly, nefarious beings took the meaning of the word crime and completely twisted it, and it's was a catalyst for a lot of the division in our country. So check that out. I have no affiliation with it. It's just something that was really important to me in my own truth journey whenever I found it years ago. Lincoln managed, using his own resources, a successful re-election campaign. He sought to heal the war-torn nation through reconciliation. On April 14, 1865, just 5 days after the Confederate surrender at Appomattox, he was attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Mary, and he was fatally shot by a Confederate sympathizer, John Wilkes Booth. I know that that is a contested statement, but that's what we think we know. Lincoln is remembered as a martyr and a national hero for his wartime leadership and for his efforts to preserve the Union and abolish slavery. Lincoln is often ranked in both popular and scholarly polls as the greatest president in American history. Lincoln's early life was born to Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln in a log cabin in Hodgenville, Kentucky. The family then migrated west through parts of the Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Jersey area, and they ended up in Indiana. Lincoln's mother had 3 children, Sarah, Abraham, and Thomas, who died as an infant. In Kentucky and Indiana, Thomas worked as a farmer, cabinet maker, and carpenter. In various times, he owned farms and livestock. Thomas and Nancy were members of a separate Baptist church, which forbade alcohol, dancing, and slavery. Lincoln's mother, Abe Lincoln's mother, died on October 5th, 1818. Nancy Lincoln, according to the official narrative, died of something called milk sickness, leaving 11-year-old Sarah in charge of the household, including her father, 9-year-old Abraham, and Nancy's 19-year-old orphan cousin, Dennis Hanks. On December 2nd, 1819, Thomas married a Sarah Bush Johnson, widow from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, with 3 children of her own, who Abraham became very close to and called her mother. Lincoln disliked hard labor associated with farm life. That was the story anyway. His family even said he spent all his time voraciously reading, scribbling, writing, ciphering, and writing poetry. Again, self-educated. Let's get into that. Lincoln was largely self-educated. His formal schooling was from a couple of local teachers and included 2 short stints in Kentucky where he learned to read, but probably not to write at the age of 7, and in Indiana where, due to farm chores, he attended school only sporadically, and a total of fewer than 12 months aggregated by age 15. So from 7 to 15 years of age, Abraham Lincoln attended school, formal school, 12 months, less than 12 months. He taught himself what he needed to know, and then some. Families, neighbors, and schoolmates recalled his reading included the Bible, Aesop's Fables, John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, and the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. Despite being self-educated, Lincoln was the recipient of honorary degrees later in life, including an honorary Doctor of Law from Columbia University in June of 1861. As a teen, Lincoln's father grew more and more dependent on him for farming making fences necessary to keep the family afloat. He was also regularly hired his son out to work. More on that later. Lincoln was tall, strong, athletic, and became adept at using an axe. Lincoln gained a reputation for strength. In March 1830, several members of the extended Lincoln family, including Abraham, moved west to Illinois, a free state, and settled in Macon County. Abraham then struck out on his own and made his way in New Salem, Illinois for 6 years. Lincoln traded goods, including live hogs, by flatboat to New Orleans, Louisiana, where he first witnessed slavery and met Harriet Tubman. Now, the rest of the information that I'm going to go over is largely provided to me by the soul that walked in Abraham Lincoln when he was a young boy. I know the soul. The soul is a soul family member of mine, and we will call him Adolf. And he walked in Abe Lincoln when his mother died, and he walked in JFK during the Bay of Pigs. Have an awesome soul family. So, during the conversation I had with Adolf, the soul of one of the souls of Abe Lincoln, there were statements made that correlated another being that stepped forward to give her truth from the other side of the veil. And you would recognize her by the name of Pocahontas. Check out that video. Some of the notable similar comments are, this is from Pocahontas. The Native Americans during the colonization of America taught the farmers and ordinary people how to fight against evil. The evil that was already attacking the natives. It was not only the founding fathers, but also the redcoats who were vampires. The natives knew how to fight them. They had been fighting them long before the British settlers arrived officially. The blue people walked among various tribes, but they also fled to inner earth as their bloodline was being hunted and attacked at an inhumane level. The blue people, the Arcturians, were a divine bloodline and were being hunted as well as other tribes that were ancient and good people. They are known to you as the Utes and the Paiutes. They fled into inner earth. America was always a melting pot of species and races. Many beings who were sent to America, once released from prison in the lands known as Scotland, Ireland, Armenia, Greece, West Indies, Asia, and the United Kingdom. With a common thread to most of these groups are having deep religious ties, deep spiritual and cultural practices, but they were all labeled satanic, devil worship, or black magic. When these beings came to America, they looked for land and areas that could once again revive their cultural practices, which meant areas where they could be deeply connected to the earth, water, wind, and fire, the elements. Always being a component of transformation and rebirth, these were vital. Many of these beings were being persecuted and hunted by those who wanted their power spiritually speaking, but had no access to it as they were all soulless beings. Per Pocahontas, the hunting of the divine bloodline was merciless and inhumane and stretched across all continents on the planet, which is why these races sought refuge in inner earth and created a higher consciousness dimension within our earth. There were many details that have been shown to us that are inverted truths. Now, there are always truth in movies, right? So they tell us what they're doing, but they wrap it in sci-fi. And so science fiction movies. It should be called science fact, because as I've been on this journey for a while and I've been able to access truth by source creator or actually going to the beings themselves, I know that a lot of what we see in these films are actually available to us now, have been available for a very, very long time. It's very naive to think that it's not. Just like I get downloads of information from my team, from my higher self, so have the filmmakers. They have access to the other side. Where do you think they come up with this stuff? It's because they have access to what's actually happening galactically. So, many details that have been shown to us that were inverted truths in the movies and books, just like now. What they say is good is actually bad, and what is being shown to be bad was actually intended to be good originally before it gets fucked with. Now we get back to the soul known as Adolf, who walked in the human known as Abraham Lincoln in his younger life. Adolf described Thomas as a skillful vampire hunter who taught the craft of hunting and destroying vampires. Adolf also stated that the Underground Railroad was not just for saving and smuggling slaves into free states, but also Harriet Tubman, who had met Abe earlier in his life when he transported goods along the Mississippi River in the flatboats. Harriet and Abe agreed to assist one another as much as possible. As the slaves left the plantations, they would grab silver as much as possible and smuggle this northward to mills that would make silver bullets to be used to eradicate the vampires. Are you shocked yet? Questions to Adolf. Question: how did Abe's mother actually die? I asked this because I just didn't resonate with what they're saying. She died of a milk sickness, illness. I just thought it was made up. She was turned by a vampire, and my father Thomas had to get rid of her before she destroyed us all. Okay, didn't really see that coming, but plausible. Question: were there beings who asked Abe to run for president of the United States as he was not a conventional candidate? Now, I asked this question because I read to you his upbringing. He was always moving around. It's not like he was connected to extremely powerful people. He was self-educated, so he wasn't a part of fraternities and secret societies and all that kind of stuff. But he was very, very strong, very clear intent, very spiritually sound being. So it occurred to me that he was approached just like DJT was approached to balance out things. Yes, inner earth beings, natives, slaves, off-worlders all wanted him to help with their plight of being a hunted race. They were facing genocide by the hand of the royal crown and the Vatican. Abe was placed in the President of the United States position to have a light being with resources to battle legions of the undead that were feeding on our people, quite literally. Question: when Abe was a child, did he start to understand early on what was really happening with the missing children and the murders? Did he use his clairs to know there was not all these unknown or strange illnesses as much as it was an extermination campaign? Answer: yes. He was never in the full amnesia of his spiritual gifts. I, Adolf, walked in to help Abe when his mother was turned and had to be removed before harming others. Thomas, Abe's father, trained Abe in the skill of hunting vampires and contracted his work out to area landowners to help that way. It is told that he helped others farm because he was strong and capable. They just don't say he was very capable and successful vampire hunter. Question: Abe and Mary Lincoln's children, Robert, William Wallace, Edward, and Tad. Tell me about them. Answer: the only safe place for their children was away from Abe and Mary. Robert, Edward, and Tad were sent to Armenia, Libya, and Egypt. The child seen in pictures reported to be Robert is in fact an orphan Abe found and took in. His parents had both been murdered when he was a baby. William Wallace, also known as Willie, was with them a few years, and then they decided to fake his death and send him away for his safety as well. All of our children live long, full lives. Question: explain how Abe was so skilled in the hunting of vampires. Answer: an old, very, very old vampire encountered Abe and admitted that he saw the long-range plan was to never stop until the world was a dark place full of bloodthirsty, soulless beings. The vampire deeply regretted this choice and his actions and worked with Abe to train him in the nuances needed to kill vampires efficiently and effectively. The rest of this information is Adolf sharing with me what he wants to share. Many movies have been made that show us the truth, such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, Interview with a Vampire, and Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter. These give some background context as to why and how so many were missing and murdered. Consider this factor when remembering his story, H-I-S, story, history, taught to us. Abe was the first president of the United States since George Washington to want to return to the people the wealth, the sovereignty, and the access to freedom. This was not popular with the power-hungry control freaks who literally survived on the blood and sweat of other races. Currently, you are seeing this play out in your timeline. Remember, this is Adolf speaking. My twin flame walked in Mary when Abe and Mary met. Then once Abe was assassinated, we both left the bodies known as Abe and Mary Lincoln. Mary's original soul was weak and frail and very depressed to be alone in her life, knowing her children lived but were not safe to be with her. She was placed in a mental asylum until her death. To give some context on the length of time, there have been an entity that we call the military-industrial complex. This entity actually started at the fall of Atlantis. The fall of Atlantis was a frequency fall, a fall into lower dimensional feelings and vibrations. Atlantis is a starship, actually a mothership. The Arcturians and the Pleiadians used to bring high technology and high consciousness to humanity in that time. It was through the selfishness and, quite frankly, the lustfulness of some of our notable Greek family and gods, such as Poseidon and Zeus, to name a couple, who are responsible for the acts that led to the fall of Atlantis. When the depravity took over and the consciousness fell into the third dimension duality, the consciousness level of Atlantis left the planet's surface, took off, flew away like spaceships do. So the military-industrial complex has been obsessed with hybrid super soldiers for thousands of years. The ideas brought forth at the fall of Atlantis was the hybridization of light beings with dark beings, then superpowered them to use and be manipulated for evil purposes. This violates universal law and was never tolerated, but when the masses became part of the darkness, the light was fighting a losing battle for a very long time. The beings that were a part of the military-industrial complex wanted collaboration with extraterrestrials to combine the power of the galactics with the vampires, witches, and reptilians for power, control, greed, and immortality. Now, this is from me. Many of the underground laboratories at military-industrial complex black sites are strictly forbidden and also used for hybrid experiments. This horrific truth was shown to me last year sometime as I worked through shadow work. I had a really hard time when I got to the point where I was forgiving all parties involved for all things to let go of the shadows that I needed to deal with. I went into meditation with the intention of getting clarity on this with Source Creator. And what I was shown was that many of the beings in these underground laboratories and secret laboratories today are the incarnation of the beings that were performing the experiments in the past. So they're there now to balance out their karma, and therefore are not to be saved from that soul contract, because that's what they have contracted to do, to balance out the negative polarity life that they had prior. In that context, I was able to find the ability to forgive and understand that within the bounds of the soul contract, I do understand carrying out nefariousness. So hopefully that helps you too. Many of the labs in underground Antarctica, Ukraine, the various mesas in southwestern United States, Greenland, just to name a few, are full of evil scientists without a soul, dark souls of the military-industrial complex, soulless beings being created in the lab like NPCs, and negative AI off-worlder galactics, who are all have a stake in creating the ultimate super soldier. Some of this has been hinted to in movies like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I have no association with the film, but in that one, there's a lot of reference to things that have been happening over millennia galactically, especially when it comes to hybrid programs. Many guardians and starseeds, lightworkers, have served multiple 20-year stints as super soldiers. In my humble opinion, we contracted that life to obtain the knowledge to be able to take down these nefarious actions. Yes, I have had past lives as super soldiers. I've had a few 20-year stints. I always try to find the silver lining, and definitely want to find the truth, whether it's silver, gold, or lead. The truth can be respected and lies cannot. And the truth hurts sometimes. The truth is a gut punch sometimes, but it doesn't make it any less true. It means we have the ability to then have the free will choice to determine our path and our trajectory, instead of being manipulated through our mind by textbooks, higher education. When you look back at academia in totality, and you look at who holds the copyrights and the production rights to create the books that we are taught from and that we learn from, they all come back to the same nefarious sources. So you have to ask yourself, was I actually taught truth? You will find the answer is no. There are people that go through this life and then they frequencies start to rise, not because of anything that they're actively doing, but because of like the solar energy and everything's coming in. You do rise your frequency, and all of a sudden you can find truth. Part of being in a lower vibrational state is that it's hard for you to discern truth from the narratives. So when beings start to look for the truth, they get talked down to, called names. You're an outcast. You can be, lose your job or threaten to lose your job or whatever. And that's because the matrix only stays the matrix as long as the light of truth doesn't eat through, right? As soon as the light of truth starts to come through, the matrix starts to fall apart and dissolve. So you can say that the truth is the dove in the darkness, right? As soon as you start to recognize that there is truth out there that you have not been told, and you can go find it, you have discernment to say, that's not true. I know that's not true. That feels so made up. Then you have a leg up on the nemesis. So I create these videos for educational purposes. I create these videos for entertainment purposes. I create these videos because long ago, Source Creator said, you are going to be a voice of truth on YouTube. And I was like, what? And here I am. I am doing what I said I would do. Now, my hope is that if you've made it this far, you understand that there are a lot of things that we have not been told about our existence. There are a lot of things we do not know about our history because it would completely change the positions of power. Those positions are crumbling. Truth is winning in an overwhelming wave. And I am happy to be a part of that. Even if it's a little part, I'm really happy to be a part of the truth. That is respectable, whether you like it or not. So the other thing I want to mention is the beings that are stepping forward. They step forward because this is important, because they have seen from the other side of the veil how lies have harmed people and how keeping us from the truth have just led us blindly into following the wrong leaders. And they want more than anything for us as a people to elevate our consciousness and go back up into unity consciousness, which is Christ consciousness, which is the return of Christ. It is within your power to do that. We do this on an individual level, and then that frequency rises and ripples throughout the collective. And before you know it, we have a movement, which is where we are now. So I volunteered to do this a long time ago. You volunteered to do this a long time ago. This is your soul contract to come into this gangster planet and be a light worker, a way shower, a starseed, be a ground crew, be a guardian. This is what we contracted to do. So share it far and wide. You never know who might need this dose of truth today. And I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Founding Fathers Discovery Series, Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States and Vampire Hunter. Have a great day.